This is a production of Cornell University.
Hi, my name is Kate McCullough, and I'm the Director of Undergraduate Studies in English currently, and I want to just welcome everybody for coming. I just want to welcome you. This is the third, I think, instantiation of Books Sandwiched In, which is a new program we launched this year in the English department, devoted or dedicated particularly to undergraduates, and it's meant to just provide a kind of casual forum for undergrads to be able to meet and talk to and hear about the work of various faculty members. So I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, who I know a lot of you know already. So Professor Mukoma Wa Ngugi joined us last year, actually, after completing his PhD at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And as you probably know from the publicity you've received for this event, he wears two hats, and quite stylishly, too. So on the one hand, he's a scholar of African literature who specializes in post-colonial literature and theory and does across a broad range of genres and forms, and is working currently on a manuscript called Amos Tutola and John Clare, Aesthetics and the Politics of Language in the Romantic Peasant Poetry and African Native Literature. So that's the book manuscript that he's currently working on as an academic project. Simultaneously, however, he's already a published fiction writer and is going to, in fact, read to us today from the novel that he's recently published. But I understand that is it a sequel or just simply a second novel coming out soon?
No, this is the second one.
Second one, okay. Yeah. Not a sequel, but a second one coming.
I said a sequel, yeah.
It is a sequel.
He's
okay.
reading from the sequel.
Okay, he's reading from the sequel, which has just come out. Okay. But meanwhile, he's also published poetry and writes for various other kinds of, like BBC, Focus on Africa magazine, and various other kinds of journalistic venues. So he's got many accomplishments. So today he's going to read from the novel and perhaps talk a little bit about the way he wears those two hats and how that works out for him. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Professor Ngugi, and I hope you'll help me in welcoming him.
Thanks to Kate for the introduction, and for you guys for coming out. And for myself for being here as well, because I should be grading your work, so to speak. So what I thought I would do is maybe talk for about 20 minutes. Read and talk, about the novel for about 20 minutes. Then we can have some time for discussion. So my phone here is not to take phone calls; it's actually to time myself. So I've always been interested in popular fiction, and a lot of it is because of the kind of reading I did when I was growing up in Kenya. Kenya was colonized by the British, so our curriculum was very British-centered when I was growing up. Though we did African literature as well. But one of my favorite memories is of we would go to class and read Shakespeare, and other serious literature. But really, during breaks, what we wanted to do was talk about David Milo. Now, David Milo wrote what I would call pornographic filth. There's no, there's no other way of describing it. It really was, pornography, small books, maybe about 40 or so pages. But that's what we would do. So in class we'll be, talking about Shakespeare. During our breaks we'll be talking about David Milo, exchanging copies and so on and so forth. But popular fiction in Kenya also played another role, which is when the government became oppressive and sent writers off to exile, and banned their books. You couldn't get books by the more radical, literary, Kenyan writers. It's actually the popular fiction writers who kept us reading, right? So you have people like John Korea-Mete, who wrote My Life in Crime. It's an autobiography of his life in crime. Another writers like Mwangi Roheni, who in very popular form would tell stories of unemployment, or being out in the city and crime, but then also carried a lot of Kenyan history. So in these same popular fiction books, you'd find very serious discussion about for example, the Mau Mau War for independence, right? So that's kind of reading I was doing, but then as I grew older, I started thinking about also working in popular form, and for myself, I've always been uncomfortable with the divide of academia and the outside world, right? I came across Devil in a Blue Dress by Walter Mosley, right? And in Walter, I don't know if you've seen the movie Devil in a Blue Dress, but he's able to carry a lot of issues of culture, issues of race, issues of class in a detective novel, right? And in fact, one of his characters, I've modeled one of my characters after his character Mouse. Now Mouse is really just a bad motherfucker, if I may use the language. And one of my favorite scenes is when Easy Rollins is sort of like the good detective, leaves Mouse with a witness to something, right? And then Mouse kills the guy Easy has left him with, and then Easy comes and asks him, why did you kill him, Mouse? Why did you kill him? And then Mouse asks Easy, well, if you didn't want me to kill him, why did you leave him with me? So, so I don't know. It's a very interesting character who has a certain duality that then I modeled my detective by the name of Odhiambo. He's a Kenyan detective by the name of Odhiambo who has that sort of capacity for great violence, but at the same time is hopefully likable. An anti-hero kind of character. And then you have a character, my other detective who carries the novel is Ishmael. Ishmael is an African American who in the first novel ends up in Kenya to investigate a case, and when he's there, he decides to stay. So in this novel, Ishmael and O have partnered and opened a detective agency called Blackstar. Hence the title, Blackstar Nairobi. Of course, playing around with the Marcus Garvey Blackstar liner, right? So with Ishmael, I was interested in, in telling a fun story. These books are fun to write. You should see me when I'm writing. Sometimes I'm laughing. Because you're able to do things with these sort of characters that I think you wouldn't be able to do in serious literary fiction. So let me. Okay, so with Ishmael, I'm able to explore issues of African American identity. And the first thing I want to read from the book is when the book is set during the post-electoral violence in Kenya of 2007 and Obama's election here, right? So the scene I want to read for you is one that is exploring in its own hopefully funny way, the politics of identity. So, and this particular passage takes place in Kenya. There's this bar actually we used to go to called Broadway's with my brother, and the bar really was a place where thugs and policemen would hang out. Like everybody just hanged out. And I never understood the psychology of it, But you'd have, policemen sitting in one corner. Then people know a bank robber sitting in another corner. It was as if there was this sort of a truce, but they're also very colorful characters. One of the characters whom I sort of modeled, a character here I'm calling MC Hammer, was the manager of the bar, who we did something wrong with my brother because I'd go there with my girlfriend, but we never tell the guy that, this is my girlfriend, because he would buy us free beer, hoping, that we could introduce him. But I remember he'd always say, when he's making his move, music is the food of love. So they're in this bar, right? Okay. So we walked into the bar just as the 5 o'clock news was coming on. It had taken me months to adjust to how seriously Kenyans take the news hour. All bar TVs changed their channels to one of the news stations, regardless of whether there is a replay of a European Cup football game on. It was like common prayer, only in this case it provided fodder for beer talk. As in the US, news presenters in Kenya were household names. This evening, Catherine Kasivuli, the Katie Couric of Kenya, was on. MC Hammer immediately yelled that he wanted to marry her. Dressed in the real Hammer signature gold and yellow pants and with graying but dyed red punkish hair, this MC Hammer was the jester in this court of police and robbers. He knew everyone and a bit of everything. MC Hammer was like a clown wearing a mask. Senator Obama dominated the news as he had since he declared his candidacy back in February. This time it was about allegations that he was a Kenyan citizen and not an American. Like being a Kenyan is a crime, MC Hammers coughed. O and I had been driving back to town from somewhere. I turned on the radio and there it was. Barack Hussein Obama had declared his candidacy. We had gotten back to Nairobi to find everyone honking, some people waving Obama posters, others selling t-shirts and coffee mugs. Much later, an Obama beer called the Senator would be born, though the knowledgeable suggested it was more of the same regular task in an Obama beer can. Oh, that's all true. There was a beer that was named after, it was called Senator. Ishmael, how do you feel? O had asked, one of your own as the president of the USA. I had always thought of Obama as black like me. Black people in the United States had been at the center of it all. The building of the country, inventions, science, sports, yet somehow we had remained on the sidelines. To be in the White House finally, and yet there was something else I could not articulate. I didn't feel like he could truly speak for me, but I guess the moment was bigger than any of us. Bill Clinton as the first black president, it was time to get rid of blackface presidents. I wanted Obama to win. How the fuck does racism survive this? I asked O. You'll be surprised. We have had only black presidents, and look at Africa, look at how divided. He said, turning his head to see my reaction. But enjoy it. It is going to be quite something, O said more kindly when I didn't say anything. As if on cue, the Kenyan president had got on the radio to say that the following day would be a public holiday. When Obama won Kenya, the following day was actually a public holiday in Kenya. That was a good move. The whole country was going to be hungover tomorrow anyway. For a moment, I had felt homesick. The strong but tired rhythm of small Madison, Wisconsin, where I had grown up. My parents and their pretense to wealth. Beautiful Mo, the Pulitzer-winning journalist I had loved, but who saw me only as a black cop. The United States and its racisms of class and color. In that moment, I missed the career I had left behind. I missed my other life, my parallel life, the life I was supposed to live, the one that didn't involve being in love with a woman like Maddie or having a partner like O, the life with a pension ahead of me. I even missed the euphemism, died in the line of duty. Only for a moment though, because the life I had chosen was here in this country. So the next excerpt I want to read for you is about, I'm interested in the logic of preemptive strikes, right? And the whole novel is premised on a group of, very intellectual mercenaries, a group that believes that the best way of bringing change to society is by getting rid of all the corrupt leadership. So in this country, it would be to get rid of the Democrats and the Republicans, and just start anew, right? But with that comes the possibility of what then is absolute evil, because of the amount of conviction, then it takes to make, essentially to do a preemptive strike where you don't know in terms of innocence and guilt. It's as if you're committing a small evil today with the hope of preempting evil into the future. So it's a concept that interests me a lot. So now I want to read you a passage where, where the main bad guy by the name of Sahara is trying to explain, to Ishmael and O and Maddie. Maddie is this Ishmael's love interest, why he does what he does, why he believes in this, sort of cleaning up of society. Why? I asked him, wanting to understand. You don't know what you're doing. I forgive you for that. If you could open your eyes for a minute, if you could see what I see, you'd be helping me create new men and women, a new country, one that is not tied to the past. A society past the point of singularity. A people so far into a new, better future that there will be no going back, he answered, waiting for the inevitable question. What the fuck are you talking about? Point of singularity, the peaceful place where the laws of the past no longer affect the present. Call it a clean slate, a new beginning. Genesis, only there is no God, only man, and only man can give man a new beginning. We are our own saviors. What is it that Obama likes to say? We are the ones who have been waiting for. The waiting for Kenya can end today if you just let me. If you look outside yourself, this is your moment, he said, sounding like a general about to lead a charge. Do you hear yourself? Why you are not somebody else? Maddie asked him. She had been quiet, observing all along, perhaps wondering what made Sahara possible. You see, that is the problem. If I had a cancer, I would be asking why me and not someone else. Well, damn it, why not me? Why not me to bring in the new day? Why not you or Ishmael? Why not all of us? Sahara asked, looking at each one of us. I'm not a megalomaniac or a savior. I just happen to have taken responsibility for the world I live in. My conscience is clean. Can you say the same? I could see it. If I had been younger and just witnessed the brutality of apartheid South Africa, like Amos and the other men and the other young men who had joined him, I would have joined him as well. So he's very persuasive, and this is towards the end of the novel, so I can't go any further without, revealing. But the detectives, they get really tempted, because this is at the time of the post-electoral violence, and the opposition is talking with the ruling party. They're in a conference, and it's very, very tempting for the detectives just to allow the bomb to go off and see if his policy or preemptive. I guess preemptive revolutions would work. So related to that, of course, I'm interested in the idea of terror. Most of you have heard of the recent Al-Shabaab attacks on the on a Kenyan mall in Kenya. And I wrote an article about that actually for The Guardian. If you're interested in the background, let me know. I can give you the URL for that. But really what I'm interested in theoretically is the question of hospitality, right? And this is in relation to Derrida, who argued that that a true hospitality is not possible because you'll always differentiate. So his argument was if somebody comes to visit you, if it's true hospitality, then there should be no differentiation between the visitor and your relatives, for example, right? So for your argument, there is no real hospitality. In the first novel, I actually tend to argue against that. I show an instant where true hospitality happens. Again, thinking of an example of Native Americans who took in slaves and with no differentiation accepted them into their community, intermarriages, exchanged ideas about agriculture. So there are some instances of a true hospitality where there's no differentiation. But with this particular novel, the hospitality is not quite working, right? Because here in the U.S., you have Obama running, he has just won, but there's all this racism coming up, and in Kenya is just about to go to crisis. And just to give you a little bit of background. So before the post-electoral violence broke out in Kenya, everybody was making the argument that, no, we are Kenyans, we don't kill each other, even though, of course, with each election there had been a few murders here and there. But there was that belief that you would never come to a point of, we'll never get to the cusp of genocide. So, in fact, a friend of mine who's a writer sent out an email to other writers from Kenya. He said, hey, look, guys, I think it's going to be different this time. The chatter I'm hearing, the chatter of people talking, it's like anything I've ever heard of, And of course, we wrote back and we told him, no, we are Kenyans, So there are ways in which, the violence, by the time the violence broke out, it was a complete surprise for even people like me, who follow the politics closely enough and write about it. So in the novel, I tried to have that sort of surprise of the violence, where the detectives are just going about their lives investigating a case. They can hear the chatter of violence, but they can't quite see it. They don't believe it's going to happen. And then, of course, when it happens, it drags them in. So I want to read a passage. I'm glad you have had your lunch already, because it's, because I wanted to read the violence in such a way that it would be sort of voyeuristic, but not an enjoyable violence. It's a violence that will make you feel uneasy as you read the book. So I want to read you a passage where now they have, where now they're to survive. They have had to engage militia, right? It's either them or get killed by militia that's out to kill, or because of his ethnicity. A few rows down, I hear an AK-47. It's not us, and I calm the fear that comes with knowing the efficiency of the weapon. I crawl on my belly and hide between some bushes as two machetes swish past me. I kill them both, shoot them in the back and advance, and keep crawling on my stomach, waiting so I can pick out the AK. An AK fires in my direction. I stare down as a minty, wet tea leaf smell wafts my way. Guided by the silhouette and his long police overcoat hitting against the leaves, I shoot at the mass. He falls. I crawl to him. I can feel his warm blood against the coolness of the dead leaves on the ground. I slither, groping for his extra magazines. I find them, tuck my Glock into the small of my back, and pick up his AK. I have an AK, I shout to my comrades. More AK fire coming from the rear, and once again I wait, and then continue crawling until the policeman is almost standing over me. He sees or senses me, but is too late to recoil his arms and clear the length he needs for the AK. I edge just a little bit closer, spin onto my back and fire the AK into his chin. He topples backwards. I can feel a sudden burst of rainwater, but I know it's blood splattering on my face. Before he hits the ground, I'm on one knee firing into whoever is behind. We slowly, mercilessly, and methodically dig a hole through their rear guard. We sound more organized. The young men and what is left of the police force lose the will to fight. They slow down and keep slowing down until ahead and around us there are no more flashlights. We make it to the clearing and to the back and back to the path to the house. Maddie places her hand on my shoulder. I shudder at her touch and she spins around so that I'm looking at her, her face glowing from the flames of the burning house. How many of them were armed, she asked. I don't know, Maddie. All of them, some of them, I say. Not all of them had guns. Not all of them could even have not all of them could even have had sharpened machetes. You understand? Some of them were just young, jobless, hopeless men. Peer pressure forced some of them to belong to the gang. If Amnesty comes here tomorrow and they count the bodies, this will be a massacre no matter what we say. But you know what you know, okay? Should we have left Mary's parents to burn with the house so that we could escape? So and it goes on and on after the violence. They're trying to, justify, intellectually they know possibly a lot of the people they killed were just people who just the day before are high school dropouts, right? Some of them might have been armed, might not. In a sense, they can see the senselessness that for them to survive, it's as if they have done a preemptive evil as well. For them to survive, they have had to kill people they know are probably didn't deserve to die, but would have killed. Well, arguable. So let me, the other passages I wanted to read by the interest of time and a discussion. Let me read you two things. One is, I'm interested in music, and I'm interested in portraying music as a way of talking about the Black diaspora, right? I think with most of my writing, even when characters are sort of loggerheads, right? The closest they come to being together is when they're listening to music or doing something artistic. So I want to read you a part where Maddie, who is the love interest of all, but also a survivor of the Rwandan genocide, and also very violent. But the scene I want to read you, they're in Mexico. As they go about investigating their case, he leads them to Mexico before they come to the US. And she decides to do a quick performance in a cantina. And while there, they have met a colorful character called Julio, who is like a benevolent drug dealer. Maddie, Julio, and I were sitting in a bar simply called Cantina. It could have been a bar in the slums of Kenya. It was so devoid of comforts that even the walls seemed out of place. Yet it was lively with men and women talking loudly over cigarettes and tequila. There were some musicians on a makeshift stage picking at their guitars, riffing off each other, and they seemed to be enjoying playing with each other even more than entertaining the bar. Every now and then a drunken patron would join them and sing along for a few minutes before getting thirsty and going back to the bottle. Soon Maddie was on stage performing a poem with a man wearing a cheap guitar loosely across his shoulders like it was an AK-47, his fingers moving rapidly to produce a slow, deliberate sound, like a train chugging up and down hills, straining when going up and braking when going down to maintain speed. Maddie was speaking just above the guitar, sometimes missing a step, or at other times catching up, a Tower of Babel speaking to each person in their own special language, to individual needs, fears, and hopes. The English teacher who had translated for the principal at the school was standing next to Maddie, rendering her words into Spanish, gesturing animatedly, performing alongside her. Water is like blood. It flows, water dies. But water lives if it's in an ocean, if in its bed there are many, many like us, many like bones, odd-shaped, a jigsaw puzzle of the dead African bones that hold the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic and the Mediterranean and the Pacific. In the Sahara, the Sahel, in the Mojave, in the Chihuahua Desert, this barren land strewn with odd-shaped bones, each oasis draws life from blood like us. Blood is like water. It flows and it dries, but not if it's a memory. Look, who is that? She asked, pointing to a faded painting with thin cigarette, soot and cobwebs running down it. The teacher repeated the question to the bar. Younger, a few disjointed voices yelled back. Gaspar Younger, or to call him by another name, Dedan Kimathi Washiori. But today, let's just call him Love. I don't know how much time do we have. Would you like one more passage or shall we discuss?
I would like one more passage.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I don't know.
All right. So in that case, let me read you. I'm working on a novel. I'm working on a new novel about tizita music, right? And tizita, actually, there's a professor by the name of Doug Mai who has written on the tizita. So actually, when I was interviewing, I read his essay. It was about the tizita, and the whole idea of the tizita is it's like blues music, but it's Ethiopian music that I think it goes a little bit deeper than the blues because there's no object attached to it of loss, right? It's more like a society. It's more like a song of societal melancholy, right? And if you can go back to Freud's mourning and melancholy, right? In mourning, you mourn something, you have lost something, you know. With melancholy, you just know you have lost something. You just know you have lost something, you don't know what quite it is. So it's like mourning for something that you can't bury, right? So for me, when I listen to the tizita, it sounds like that, right? And then the last thing about the tizita is that to be respected as a musician, you have to sing one tizita, right? It will be the equivalent of singing the Super Bowl, singing the halftime, right? Like when you do that in the US, then you know truly, you have reached, I don't know, somehow you earn the people's respect through that, So in Ethiopia, to earn the respect of your listeners, even though probably you have done very well, you have to do a tizita. So this particular passage I want to read takes place at a bar, And sometimes I feel like I'm writing the same novel all over and all over again, but it takes place in a bar. It's not necessarily. It's a boxing club, an underground boxing club, right? And what has happened is the owner the owner is Ethiopian, but to give it legitimacy, has decided to hold a tizita competition. So essentially, it's as if they're slugging it out on a makeshift stage. So okay, let me just start reading and then we can discuss. And you have different characters. One is called the corporal, the one is called the diva, the other one is called the Taliban man, and so on and so forth. The corporal and the masinko, discordant like the buzz of the bee, but depending on its player, as sweet as its honey, or as bad as its sting. The instrument of prayer or cursing. My people sent smoke from a sacrificial lamb high into the sky. If God was listening, he went up straight as an arrow. The sound of the masinko in perspective was sound sent up to God to tell him of the devil, a sweet, most terrifying sound. Where other singers tried to take us to heaven or hell, the corporal kept us on earth. We wanted to break into tears and jump into the abyss. A catharsis, of course, that would allow us to go back to the morning with all the pain and reminder it brought, but he was denying us that. I have a lot to miss, but when I die, what I'll miss the most is music, because music is life itself and then some. He said, his voice sounded like there was sawdust in his vocal cords. He let out a low, long growl that went underneath the masinko. Not a threatening growl, but a sound of a voice trying to find footing from a place that was an early memory. The first sound ever made, it felt like. and then he joined his masinko and closed his tizita in a soothing falsetto. The diva, Mr. Selassie, who is announcing, is the owner of the bar of the boxing club. The diva, Mr. Selassie, screamed into the mic. The diva walked in, a glow of whiteness from her shiny diamond dress, long silver metallic nails wrapped around the microphone, high heels tapping a rhythm by way of introduction. She pulled the gold sheet away from the piano, sat down, smiled, and started playing. And we waited and waited for her voice, for that first sound, but she kept playing and shaking her head from side to side, as if each high note was dragging her along against her will. At first I thought she was playing an instrumental, but she kept leaning into the microphone as if about to start singing before being pulled away by the piano. With every exertion to give cry to the key she made, her breath escaped her mouth in small puffs bursts into the microphone. I let the need to hear her voice subside in me, and instead let myself fall on the piano keys, light as feathers, so that every time she hit a key, my body fluttered. But it felt like there was something wrong. Her or I, her or the audience, one or the other was in the wrong place. She stopped playing as soon as Selassie coughed into the microphone. She seemed to think for a minute. What if in heaven there was no sound? What would a silent heaven sound like? She whispered, a bit drugged it seemed. He coughed into the mic again. It felt like the stage could barely contain her, and the pain or anguish of being confined seemed to be rising out of her, finding singular pronunciation in a low cry she let out at the start of her tizita. She let out a cry that started a high note, then made lightning maddening jumps, tapping something here and there until she hit the earth with a deep bass. She had, in the first few notes, gone deeper than the corporal. She stopped playing the piano altogether and she sang. And even though she had stopped playing, I could still hear it. She had suggested the piano and then let us do the rest of the work while she took us through the tizita. And then she was done. The Taliban man, Mr. Selassie announced, and we went wild, never having listened to his music. I assumed it was for relief because we were not ready to go where the diva was taking us. We cheered wildly and yelled and clapped each other's back, bought each other beer and lit cigarettes, until Mr. Selassie coughed and laughed into the mic and yelled again, "The Taliban man!" The Taliban man stood up and went to the piano, and a few keys in, I knew a statement was being made here. If you are many people with different rhythms, voices, how would you hear yourself? As one, as many? He was playing that many songs at the same time. The little I knew told me that ragtime is classical music played over itself. Call it schizoid jazz, where each voice has something to say or sing, madness contained. Taliban man was all of them, and I was sure he would take the cup home. He hit a few more bars, leaned back and laughed. He left the piano and picked up a guitar. He played an instrumental tizita, the guitar clean and efficient, walking steadily underneath his voice. Then he broke into the tizita faster and slower until a lean steel guitar jazz tune emerged. It was not quite working. It was like the two were clashing, jazz refusing to be contained and the tizita beat insisting steadily on being heard. They both overwhelmed each other, and I, for one, was getting disjointed. He laughed again, lifted up his hands as if in defeat. Yep, thank you. Yeah, so you got to hear the taste of the tizita novel. Yeah, actually, if you go to YouTube and just Google tizita, I mean, it's amazing music, then you get all different musicians who have been singing the tizita, from back in the day to more contemporary musicians. Mm-hmm.
Do you play musical instruments, and do you find that it's easier to write about music, an instrument, or like have a background in music in that way?
I mean, I play guitar, but and I guess that's why I write about the music, because I play very poorly. I've been playing for over 20 years and I haven't improved, so but yeah, but I think it helps, because maybe I can hear what I'm not doing, But generally, it's been interesting working on the novel and then taking a break and playing the guitar. I mean, it's, yeah. But I think I sound better when I'm writing than when I'm playing. Yeah.
So, do you have any practical advice for writers who are looking to break into genre fiction?
I would say I don't know. I would say have no boundaries, but that sounds so vague, right? But I would say, okay, first with genre fiction, you have to write it as seriously as you would anything else, right? So for me, when I'm writing, even though it's detective fiction, I write it as seriously as I write, a scholarly paper and so on and so forth, right? That's the first one. The other one is not to have any imaginative boundaries, because with these characters, you can do anything. They're so malleable. You can push them to the extremest of situations, and they'll find a way out. The other one is to read a lot of genre fiction, as with any writing. For me, I actually teach a class on detective fiction. I taught it last semester. So, and I think reading people like Sarah Paretsky and Raymond Chandler and Walter Mosley actually helped me with the second novel. So I would say, yeah, read a lot, have no boundaries. Yeah. Is that practical?
I was kind of looking for, like, if you're trying to sell genre fiction.
Oh, okay, yeah, well, well, in that case, the first thing would be, the publishing industry, you have like 5 major publishers now, right? So it's become very consolidated. So chances are you'll need an agent. But with that said, there are some independent publishers who, like for example, my publisher, Melville, they don't require you to have an agent, so you can submit to them directly. I think you just submit. Yeah.
I want to know what your process is like, because you do the fiction and the academics. So when do you actually write? In the morning, in the night, anytime?
I've never really had a routine. Like I write. I write when I have something to write. So I know there's some writers who like to, they're very disciplined. They'll have maybe 3 hours in the morning, then that's the only time they write. Others will write at night. But for me, I write when I have something to write, and I don't know if that serves me well. But the one thing I know is I cannot write in one place for a long time. So, for example, in the apartment I'm staying in, I find now I have to put my chair on the doorway, to be able just to get a sense of a different space, But and I have a 5-hour commute, so I have a lot of time to think about something I'd like to write. Or in this case, I've been listening to tizita music, which somehow ignites something, Yeah.
And I had a follow-up, similar to the music question. Do you feel like you're a little bit of a detective as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially when you start when you're writing. When you start writing, then you start seeing things, And now I can tell. I mean, writing is interesting because now I can tell when something's happening imaginatively, because the world becomes interesting. Somebody will say something and it will trigger something. Yeah, but I mean, I do feel like a detective. Solving mysteries around the house. Who took my pen? Yeah. The fingerprints.
Somebody jumped.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think there's some crime writers who will go hang out with the police. Who are very into the procedural stuff of it. By myself, I guess. Because I'm working with Kenyan detectives where there's no procedure, I think that helps. Like nobody can say, "Oh, but he forgot to leave fingerprints," because chances are, that's what would happen. So I'm unrestricted in a way, Yeah. Paul.
Could you say a word about how similar or different it feels to you when you're working on fiction, and I guess you switch over, right? Maybe the same day you're doing scholarship, or you're writing an article for a journal or something. You go through these various modes, and
if I'm working on something that has a question that's interesting, then I think the same sort of excitement, the same sort of joy I get from discovering this next sentence in fiction. Then if I'm working with an interesting question and ideas, then I'll feel that excitement. But sometimes it doesn't work out quite that way. If I'm writing an essay for a newspaper, where you know, because with newspaper writing, you're expected to know. I mean, you're expected to know, have a lot of information. In that case, then fiction becomes more fulfilling, because with fiction, it's okay not to know. In fact, with this book, I ended with a question. You know, but I do think in terms of like if you're thinking of I don't know, if you think of a volcano erupting, whatever is underneath it, right? I think all sort of writing and scholarship shares that, you know. So maybe I draw upon one that will come out as fiction. I'll draw, you know, then I'll go to the same source, and you know, something else will come out using the form of scholarship. You know, yeah. So I mean, like with this book, I'm interested in language as well, which is, you know, my dissertation was on language. But in this case, it's a detective living and working in a country where he doesn't speak any of the languages there. You know, so for him, it's as if it's as if he's going through life with a veil. You know, but for him also, he does that as a defensive mechanism. So he says he wants to belong in Kenya, and he's trying, but at the same time, the one thing that will allow him, you know, to immerse himself in Kenya, he doesn't do it. You know, so I don't know. So they sort of influence each other. You know, the question of terror. I've written quite a bit on that for newspapers and stuff. You know, yeah.
Would you consider writing about non-Kenyan detectives, like say American detectives? Able to do?
I think it would depend on what I'm trying to accomplish. Yeah, but sure. I mean, I should be able to. You know, I think as a writer, you should be able to, right? You know, I should feel free to, I don't know, to, you know, to have so Ishmael is African American, but truly I can have him be anybody. I should be able to do that. Only that in my case, the sort of issues I'm interested in, you know, the question of black diaspora, of identity, lend themselves well to Ishmael. But I think imaginatively I should be able to have characters that, you know, that don't necessarily belong to a specific. I should be able to have, my imagination should be able to write about characters that are not necessarily rooted in one culture, I think.
So you don't feel limited by the different, like,
procedural? With this book, what I did was, actually as a way of avoiding that question, you know, what I did was I have them in Kenya working with very little, you know. And then when they come to the US, they come to the US as illegal immigrants. You know, they have to sneak in because they've been put on the terror list, so they cannot fly in. You know, they're on the watch list, so they have to go through Mexico and then sneak in through the border. An idea, incidentally, I got because a Kenyan did that, and I was, you know. But at any rate, so when they come to the US, they are working with very, very little. So I don't have to worry about, I don't know, like the latest DNA sequencing something, right? You know, essentially they come and function as third world detectives. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, but it's an interesting question, because your question, you know, because a lot of there's that whole argument that for lack of a better word, for white writers, it's okay for them to use characters that are you know, I don't know, that are black or African or Asian and so on and so forth. But African writers are expected to only, you know, write African characters. So it's an interesting question of one thing, how criticism, you know, decides who will write what, and also what we also accept. Yeah, so it's a good question.
I thought the Obama thread in there seemed interesting too. Did you think of making that standalone at some point? Because I think there's interest on, you know, that it comes up in all kinds of negative ways.
Yeah.
Obama's not really American. He's Kenyan. How do you?
Yeah.
There's a whole novel in there somewhere.
Yeah, there is. In fact, in the first draft, it was going to be, you know, the bad guys are trying to assassinate Obama, but it didn't quite work. You know, but I mean, I actually think there's a whole dissertation there for you guys. You know, actually, yeah, no, because for me, I always find it interesting. Here you have Obama, whom Kenyans see him as Kenyan. You know, like Kenya, you don't hear Kenyans talking about African American Obama and his black experience. It's always Obama. You know, the sort of abstract Kenyan, right? And I think mostly for African Americans, you don't hear them talking about Obama, the African with an African experience, right? And a lot of it has to do with, with historical tensions. So, but you could start a dissertation on just Obama, Obama for Kenyans and Obama for Black Americans and then for Americans in general. But he's interesting, In this novel, he comes out as a bad guy, especially because of his drone warfare, you can. There's work to be done there, I should say.
Obama is gangster. That'd be great.
Obama.
Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, but I'm sure Professor Ngugi would be happy to take a few extra questions informally afterward. And I just want to say our next speaker won't be till February, because I know soon you'll all be off frolicking on vacation. But we hope you'll join us in February, and you will get an email. Anybody who's RSVP'd for this event will get an email announcing the next event. So hope we get to see you all back here, and please join me in thanking you.
Thank you as well. Yeah. And remember to buy the book.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.